Alright, what's going on, guys? Just a quick update. I'm finally getting a PC because I needed dopamine in a really depressing time of my life, and I'm likely going to start using some other games for background footage for my future videos. I still like Clash of Clans a lot and will keep playing it, but I think that having more variety to my games will motivate me to post more. If you're subbed just to learn about my Edrag army, I apologize for the pivot. And I thought that the least I can do is to leave you with my Electro Dragon guide for the sweaty Legend League pushers. And so I'm going to start with some big picture advice, which also happen to be, I believe, the most important and will apply regardless of what army you play. And then I'll get to some specific advice about my army. This is going to be the sweatiest and most try-hard video I've posted to date, so go ahead and strap in. But it's also directed to the sweatiest viewers who are very serious about pushing to high legends with Edrags. Now, this is probably the most important tip that I can give. Only play Edrags if you love playing Electro Dragons, and the same goes for any other army. You can't chase trends, you can't chase the meta. If you constantly chase the most meta army, you're never going to stick to it because you're not going to have fun. And if you don't stick to it, you're never going to get good at it. And you definitely need the fun to balance out the inevitable frustration from Legends League, because Legends League can be very frustrating the higher you climb. When Meteor Golems just came out, I didn't even have to see how the meta was going to shake out to know that it was going to be the most meta troop. If you just compared it to a troop with similar housing space like Super Witches, 40 housing space, Meteor Golems have pretty much doubled its health. It's ridiculous. It's like comparing LeBron James with Grant Williams. I grinded Meteor Golems for maybe a week and decided that I wasn't going to play it anymore because I knew I wasn't going to stick to it because I simply wasn't having fun. And I ended up selling on Edrags, and no one knew that Edrags was going to be even remotely viable in Legends League then. I mean, I know that lower town halls complain a lot about, oh, Edrag spam, but in Legends League, Edrags are a joke in Town Hall 17. And I decided to main them anyway because I just had a lot of fun. So when you're picking an army to grind Legends League with, make sure that you prioritize an army that you generally enjoy playing and not just chasing the newest meta army, because every week there's going to be a different new meta army. Now, of course, I'm not saying that you should play Barters or Lalo, but if the army is somewhat viable and you see that some pros are pulling it off in Legends League, and you enjoy playing that army, then you should definitely just pick it and stick to it. Now, tip number 2 is once you decide on an army, you have to practice. And I know what you're thinking, yeah, no shit, you have to practice. But I still think this is very important to remind yourself of, because I think it's really important to respect the amount of effort that has to be put into an army in order to pull off triples in Legends League with the modifiers. Because if you don't respect the amount of effort that needs to be put in, then you're going to be frustrated with yourself when you start failing. Just know that the pros that climb to the top of Legends League, they practice a ton, they practice every day, they do countless numbers of friendly challenges, they use dedicated base subs on Discord with bases built by the sweatiest, most try-hard base builders, trapped, tweaked, new variations every single day, and they gain access to all these newest, freshest base either through purchasing the subs or networks, and then they keep doing friendly challenges on these bases until they get it, and then they hop into Legends League and start hitting. And they have multiple accounts, so they get to practice across different accounts in Legends League before hitting on their most try-hard account. So what I just described is basically the lifestyle you need if you want to push to, let's say, the top 50, top 10, and if it sounds ridiculous, it is. Normal people do not have the time nor energy to do all of that. I don't either. But if you're gunning for top 5,000, top 2,000, top 1,000 legends, that is all very possible. Just doing a mini version of what I just described. Try to load some of the newest bases and do friendly challenges, and try to triple it. Go to dedicated friendly challenge clans like 3-Star 1 Sun to practice. Or you could just go ahead and do your Legends League hits and treat that as practice, but don't expect to start tripling right away. Every time you fail, try to identify the biggest mistake you've made, whether it's the big picture, you're identifying the wrong crack for the base, the wrong approach, or maybe more of the micro scale, you mechanically misplaced a spell, or a spell was too late, or you mistimed your hero abilities. Just try to identify one mistake that you can improve on for your next attack. Now, once you start feeling like you've gotten the hang of your army and you're doing better in Legends League, trust me, 2 days later, you're going to start feeling like trash again, and you're going to start failing a lot again, and you're going to feel like the game suddenly became harder or your army was shadow nerfed. But that's not you, just trust the process. There are a few reasons to this. The first one is that you probably climb a little higher on Legends League, and you should not underestimate the difference in base difficulty between low to mid Legends, mid to high Legends. The difficulty difference is insane, even regardless of the levels of the bases, because the players in high Legends League get their freshest bases first, and again, these are built by just the most tryhard base builders that's just looking to trap a little differently, catch you off guard a little differently, tweak the base a little differently to catch out the most meta army at that time. And then these fresh bases slowly get leaked from high to mid Legends and then from mid Legends to low Legends. So it's totally possible that you're finding Legends League harder because you climb a little further up, and so you're finding these bases at the frontier. Now, even regardless of where you are in Legends League, the base meta changes over time. After a few days, there might be a different style of base that comes out, and people will struggle to figure out a new crack, a new approach for it. So it's totally possible that you're going to fail. And again, that's not shadow nerfing to your army. That doesn't mean you got worse at the game. It just means that the base builders are improving at the same rate as the attackers. Now, the reason I'm yapping about this is because I believe it's very important to keep this in mind. When you finally figure out how to triple a wave of bases and you start tripling for a few days, and 2 days later you start failing a ton, you feel washed, you feel depressed, you feel like you now suck, and your army feels like it got shadow nerfed. That's not the case. You're still really good at the army. It's just the base builders have adapted, and there's now a new wave of bases for you to figure out a crack for. And you're still a better player than you were before. You practicing on and figuring out cracks to the previous wave of bases has given you experience, and you are now able to recognize certain patterns in bases that is transferable over time, even onwards to the next wave of meta bases. So those two are the most important tips. Basically all I've said is find an army you like, stick with it, practice it. It's very simple, but these are basically the most important fundamentals if you're looking to push the high Legends, and that applies regardless of what army you choose to play. Now I'm going to start talking about my Electro Dragon army and some of the advice that I can give. Now first I want to give a few important points about playing Electro Dragons and also about my specific Electro Dragon army. The first thing you should prepare yourself for when playing Edrags is that it has a really high barrier to entry. It has a really high skill floor. I've seen a lot of people who saw Star switch to Edrags and thought to themselves, ooh, Edrag spam, I can do that too! And then they try to pick it up and they give up on it because it's way harder than they expected. One of the hardest things about playing Edrags is that your Edrags are like pieces of paper. They just die instantly. In all of your attacks, you're gonna go like, where the fuck are my fucking Edrags? Like, that's literally what you're gonna say in most of your attacks. And so I cannot emphasize enough the importance of keeping your Edrags alive with spell usage. Basically, 80% of this army comes down to whether you drop your spells on time, whether you pop your hero abilities on time, and all of that is simply to keep your Edrags healthy and not die instantly to an Inferno Tower or an air defense. That's why I started the video by saying that you have to practice the army, and even more so than other armies, you need to get really comfortable with where all the spells, all the troops, all the heroes, icons are at the bottom of your screen. When your Minion Prince is getting hit by a Revenge Tower, your eyes should not have to go all the way down there and try to find the totem spell and then tap on the Revenge Tower with the totem spell. You should be able to do that instantly because you're already very comfortable with where all the buttons are. Now I want to talk a little bit about how my army differs from how most people play Edrags. I would actually say that around 1 in 8 of my defenses are Edrags, so people are actually playing Edrags now, and my army differs from the meta Edrag army by quite a bit. Number 1, I always play Siege Barracks. I don't play Flame Flinger. Number 2, I have 3 Rages, and most people play 2 Rages and 1 Overgrowth. Number 3, I have an RC, and most people take a King. Now these 3 small differences combine to make one big difference, so these 2 armies actually have quite a different playstyle, so it's up to you to decide which army suits your playstyle a little better. Now let me talk a little bit more about the differences. Because I always play Siege Barracks over the Flame Flinger, I cannot stand the Flame Flinger. I don't want to stare at my screen at the Flame Flinger for 1 minute every single attack, so I just play Siege Barracks, and nothing wrong with Flame Flinger. Stars plays Flame Flinger. You know, it's a skill to learn exactly how to pull off the Flame Flinger flawlessly every attack. I learned how to do it, I know how to do it, but I just decided that it was too boring for me. And so I play Siege Barracks exclusively. And the second difference is that I take 3 Rages instead of 2 Rages and an Overgrowth. And the reason I can afford to do that is because I have an RC to take care of the back end instead of the King. In terms of stats, the King is way stronger than the RC, but RC with Frostflake and Rocket Spear can always reliably take care of the back end dangerous defense like a Revenge Tower, something that your Edrags cannot reach. And so I don't need an Overgrowth. I can afford to take 3 Rages. Now the consequence of these two things, which is the Siege Barracks plus 3 Rages, is that my army is really fast once you start your attack. It takes maybe 90 seconds or less for the entire attack to be over with. And playing a fast army comes with some advantages. Number 1 is that you basically never time fail, but that's obvious. Now, number 2 is that you get to basically double the amount of practice you get with the army. If you take an army that's always close to time failing every attack, so it takes almost 3 minutes to finish the attack every time, versus this army which basically can finish an attack within 90 seconds, then when you're doing friendly challenges and figuring out a crack to a new base, you can effectively get twice as much practice in with the faster army. That translates to learning the army more efficiently, being able to improve faster than if you were practicing another army, finding mistakes, correcting mistakes faster, finding cracks to new bases faster, and so that is a huge advantage to playing a fast army. Second advantage is that once your attack starts in Legends League, you're typically given 30 seconds to plan. In a lot of my attacks, I don't start attacking until 2:10, 2:20, so I basically have a minute and a half to plan my attack to read the base, and that's very helpful, especially in higher legends where new bases keeps getting pumped out every day. Now, so those are the two big advantages of playing a fast army. Now, the disadvantage is that because the army is so fast, you really need to be on high alert. This army is very mechanical. You have to drop the spells on time, you have to pop your hero abilities on time. If you totem the AD just a second late, if you warden an ability just a second late, boom, 2 drags just gone just like that, 1 drag dead. And you know, typically the difference between a 3-star and a 2-star is that it's maybe just one rage up Edrag can make all the difference. One rage up Edrag can literally chain and destroy the entire core. That's why it's really important to drop your spells on time to save all the Edrags, to keep your Edrags healthy, and that is basically a disadvantage of playing this quote-unquote spam army. You know, the army is so fast that once you drop everything, you really need to be on high alert, and you know, that just goes back to the importance of practicing. You need to be really good at this army because there's a really high skill floor. With this army, you don't have the luxury to decompose your attack into multiple steps. Like most other armies, you have step number 1, do an RC charge, or step number 1, do a Flame Flinger charge, or step number 1, do a Warden Walk, or a Queen charge. You know, in all those attacks, you have the luxury of focusing on one thing and then moving on to another thing. With this army, once you drop everything, you need to just lock in, and you need to multitask all the dragons, all the heroes across the entire map. You have to make really quick real-time decisions about what spells to drop where. So it's literally impossible to play this army perfectly. All you can do is to keep practicing and minimize your mistakes. And the skill floor is really high, but at some point, once you get enough practice in and enough experience in, you make just few enough mistakes that you start tripling. And this army is just the most satisfying thing to triple with. Especially for someone with ADHD like me. You know, I get to finish my Legend League hits within like less than 20 minutes because each attack is just so fast. And related to my point about how with this army you have to keep track of all the dragons and your heroes across the whole map and you have to multitask, I'm going to slide this tip in. I think it is much better to play on a tablet than a phone. I used to play on a phone and then I forced myself to switch to a tablet even though it felt kind of weird, like the whole screen was big, but I forced myself to switch to a tablet because I knew I was serious about pushing Legends, and no pro plays on their phone. They all play on a tablet for a reason, because it gives them a wider range of vision, and it helps them be more precise in dropping spells, dropping troops. So I know that if you play on your phone, you're probably not very happy hearing about this, but I'm still going to throw it out there because some people might find it helpful if they're on the fence. Playing on a tablet, again, this only applies if you really are a tryhard, you really want to be competitive. Playing on a tablet really does help, and that's honestly not specific to this army at all. A lot of the armies nowadays require a lot of multitasking, like any sort of Warden Fireball variation where you have to place King, Queen, Smash on the other side of the map. You need to do a lot of multitasking there, for example. So overall, if you're serious about improving, I would look into playing on a tablet if you're currently playing on a phone. Now I'm going to go into the specifics of how to actually use my army. In this attack, I'm attacking Hawk, who was number 1 or 2 last season, I believe. And I lost my min imprints really early because of the Headhunter CC. If I were paying more attention, I would have frozen the Headhunter. I would have done anything to save my min imprints, because my plan hinged on saving my min imprints ability to pop the invis in the middle. I wasn't able to pop the invisibility spell, and my army just got melted. And that's just one tiny mistake that caused the entire attack to fail. That's why this attack is a really good example of how mechanically challenging this army is, and that you really have to be on your toes to pull it off. Alright, now how do you read a base? You queue up for an attack in Legends League and you are confronted with a weird base. How do you start reading it? Now the whole point of learning how to read a base is so you can draft a plan up so you know where you want to enter your dragons from, where you want to enter your queen from, and whether or not you need to place 1, 2, or 3 Edrags with the rage to take out a corner to help with the funnel. So first I look at where the town hall and the heroes are. Nowadays there's a lot of base layouts where there's a corner with a long shot and 2, 3, or 4 heroes. And it's really important to identify that value, because that can easily be taken out with 1, 2, or 3 raged up E-Drags. With practice and experience, you'll be able to eventually figure out exactly how many E-Drags and how many spells you need to invest in taking out such a corner. And it's really important to take this corner out, because if you start your army from this corner, you can guarantee the 2 stars, but typically the bases are designed so that it's impossible to triple, because there's something like a raged up Inferno at the back end. Now if you start your E-Drags away from this corner, you basically cannot finish this corner off, and so you risk a 1 star. So it's a lose-lose situation, and so it's really important to be able to read the base and identify where you should do like a surgical, and exactly when and where to do it and how to pull it off with the least amount of resources, least amount of E-Drags. It comes down to practice and experience, but that is the first thing I look out for. Now the second thing I look at is, where are the Inferno Towers? The Inferno Towers are the biggest threat to your Electro Dragons. You need a way to deal with them. If there is a Inferno Tower on the outside and then 2 Infernos on the inside, you will want to freeze the Inferno on the outside and then save your Warden ability for the Infernos on the inside. So that's how you would often draft up the plan. Basically, how do you deal with each Inferno? Do you freeze it? Do you Warden ability in the middle? And so I really cannot emphasize this enough. You really have to save the Warden ability for at least one of the Inferno Towers. This is going to apply to the majority of your attacks, and if you ignore the Infernos, they are going to melt your E-Drags. So I look at where the Inferno Towers are, and it makes up a big part of my decision as to where I want to start my E-Drags from. I want to start my E-Drags where I can save my Warden ability so that I can Warden ability through 1 or 2 Inferno Towers. Now in the same tier list, I also look where the Revenge Tower is, but this one is less urgent in the sense that, sure, the Revenge Tower could be dangerous if you save it for the end, but with this army, even if the Revenge Tower is at the end of the attack, your RC can take care of it easily, and there's only 1 Revenge Tower versus 3 Inferno Towers. That's why I look at where the Inferno Towers are first. And next, I also weigh in where the Spitters are facing. Where the Spitters face does affect my decision of where I want to start my dragons a lot, because nowadays often the Spitters face the same direction. You really don't want to place your E-Drags right into 2 Spitters, unless in really rare cases. Again, there's no formula. Every base is different, so you just have to weigh the pros and cons of starting from one side versus another. And then if I'm thinking about starting on one side, I also look at where the sweepers are because I don't want to place my Edrags into sweepers that are not dealt with. Now, the sweepers are less problematic in the sense that I can just giant arrow the sweepers, so they're not as important as the spitters. And next, I look at where, okay, so far, all of these things, Town Hall Heroes, Infernal Revenge, that helps me decide how I want to open my attack, whether I want to use a surgical, and also from what direction do I want to place my E-Drags from. Next, it's getting to a little more mechanics, so I look at where the ADs and Ricos are because I want to find a good giant arrow angle. So typically giant arrow, you will want to aim for two ADs, or if there's a sweeper that's blowing in the direction of where you plan to place your E-Drags, you should take that out too. Now, when you're figuring out which ADs to giant arrow, you should always prioritize the ADs that's away from your queen. You know, shooting an AD that's right next to your queen doesn't do anything. Your queen's just going to take it out anyway. You should aim for an AD that is going to be where the other side of the dragon army is going to be, that's away from your queen. And this is also another nice thing about playing on a tablet. You get to aim your giant arrow a little more accurately. And hitting an air defense that's right in front of your dragons can mean a difference of saving one spell, two spells, you know, because if you miss the AD, you're forced to drop a totem. And finally, I look at the Ricos because symmetrical bases, there are 4 ADs, there's even amount of ADs, which means the base is symmetrical in ADs, but there's only 3 Ricos, so typically one side has 2 Ricos, the other side has 1. I look at the Ricos just to make sure that wherever I'm giant arrowing from, my queen, siege barracks, and giant aren't going to get destroyed by like 2 Ricos right off the bat. So I try to place my ground troops away from Ricos if possible. That's why I look at the Ricos. And you know, even though this is the last step of reading a base, it's really important because the ground part of your army sometimes can carry the whole attack. When your air army gets destroyed, the ground army, it's really important that they don't immediately get wrecked by Ricos. Alright, now let's take everything I've said so far and try to apply it to some examples. Here for this base, you can see that I immediately saw that there's 4 heroes and a long shot up top, and it's just a disgusting corner. I don't want to deal with that, so I immediately already made up my mind to use 3 drags and a rage to take care of that. I use a loon early to just make sure that area isn't baited by all the black bombs in the world. And of course, you know, for different corners, you can choose to use less E-Drags. Doesn't have to be 3 all the time. 3 E-Drags is a decently large investment, but in this case, I still decided to use 3 E-Drags because it's 4 heroes, and I wanted to make sure that I took that disgusting corner out no matter what. By the way, pulling off a surgical E-Drag opening like this does require practice and experience, so don't be upset if you mess it up the first, you know, even like 50 times. Sometimes you might even want to let your E-Drags be hit by an enemy hero first so that the E-Drags will aggro onto the heroes instead of splitting off to the side trash buildings before you totem. So it's little details like this that really matter. Now after that opening, why did I choose to start my dragons from the bottom side? Well, for this base it's a no-brainer because the sweepers, the spitters, are all facing upwards, and even the revenge tower is below, so I get to take it out earlier. And for my giant arrow, you can see that I was trying to aim for the AD all the way on the right. I didn't really care a lot about the AD closer to my queen and my E-Drags because that can be taken out immediately. The important AD for me to hit was the one on the right and I missed it, but just know that my intentions was to hit that one. Another thing was that I knew I had to save my Warren ability for the Inferno Towers in the middle. Usually by the time your dragons have half the push done, you look for where you want to place your RC. In this case, the base is basically gone, and I think I placed my RC just to get rid of the AD that's a threat to my E-Drags on the side there. So this base was pretty easily crushed. Now for this next base, you might be tempted to do a surgical at the top and then maybe come in from the bottom because it's away from the sweepers. But I identified that the bottom quadrant is actually a scam. There's literally nothing in the bottom quadrant. And so all the threats up top, so all I have to do is to just force my E-Drags up top, and I just have to take the spitters in the face. I use my giant arrow to take out one of the sweepers so that they don't blow my dragons. So I basically identified that if I can somehow just quickly rage my dragons past from the top right, past the town hall, kill the CC, and then I'll have to save my warren ability for that disgusting rage core in the middle, and the base is basically gone. And so notice that I early rage in the corner, number one, to funnel my dragons into the middle, and number two, because I knew I had to push quickly because I want to delay my warden ability as much as I can because I want to try to warden deeper into the core, that really dangerous core if possible. So here I giant arrowed the sweeper and the AD at the end. I made a mistake of not looking out for my queen and she died, but I quickly raged the corner to try to funnel my dragons right into the town hall and the core. I delayed my barracks. You'll see me delay putting down my barracks a lot. The reason, like after the queen, the reason for that is because I'm trying to pace my ground army with my air army. So I don't want like to place my queen and barracks down immediately, have the ground army push really far too quickly, and then my dragons are like lagging behind them because then my ground army is just gonna get wrecked. So that's why I delay my barracks. And here the funnel isn't exactly perfect, and a lot of my dragons went up top, and so that's the nice thing about Edrags, because it only takes 1 or 2 Edrags to reach the core. You rage it up and the entire core is gone. You can see in this example that I only had 1 Edrag, which is like 1 health. I rage it up and yeah, it solo took out like the Inferno, the Mono, Bomb Hive, and the Multi-Gear. And even if like worst comes to worst, you can use the RC as a crutch. Now I also made a lot of mistakes this attack. You'll see from my attacks, I make a lot of mistakes. So I think the biggest mistake here is that I should have just queen arrowed all the way from the right corner there and just taken out the sweeper. I was too greedy and I tried to take out the AD too, so I had to put my queen like somewhere in the middle, and that resulted in my giant coming out, going towards the CC and pulling out the ice golems. So that was really messy, and then my queen just died early. So that was really messy. So definitely don't copy my attacks down to a T, just listen to what I'm saying. Honestly, like I haven't been practicing at all. I've kind of just been winging my Legend League attacks and they're kind of sloppy, not gonna lie. But what's important is that you have the ability to look back and identify your mistakes. Alright, let's take a look at this base. Ooh, this is really good because this style is totally different from all the bases we've looked at so far. There isn't like a corner with heroes that you can just easily surgical. So here I see that there's 2 rage sections, each with an Inferno Tower, and I thought about just placing my dragons from the bottom left because it's behind one spitter, behind the sweepers, and also it's right into one of the rage sections, so I can just warn ability through the first raged up Inferno, and then that middle Inferno I'm going to freeze. Now how do I pull this attack off? Well, I need to funnel the 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock corners so that my drags can push from the bottom left all the way down the middle. Now the bottom, I can just easily place my queen there. There's no ground threats, and I get to giant arrow kind of to the top left there to get that 80 on the top left. The left is more problematic because there's a mono and a CC, and remember I said the CC is really annoying, so because it pulls your E-Drags. So I just placed a few E-Drags on the left and rage them up immediately, get them to funnel that corner right in so that my drags can just push down the bottom left right down the middle. So look at how by now I already used all 3 of my rages, and those rages are used with intention, right? 2 of them I used it to funnel just 2 dragons on the left just to make sure the rest of my dragons go down the middle instead of splitting on the side to the CC there and the long shot. One of them I immediately raged right into that raged up core or rage section, and I knew that I could just take my RC to take care of the other rage section, and then the rest of the base there's no more threats. So if you're more inexperienced with the army, you might want to like save a rage or something. You're not willing to drop a rage. You need to be able to read bases and identify when you really have to rage. So the first 30 seconds I already used all 3 of my rages because I knew the threats are outside the base. I need to funnel properly, and once I do that I can use all my rages, but my drags would be able to survive and finish off the rest of the base. So I do want to once again emphasize that this army is really all about spell usage. So don't be tempted to think that you need to save your spells. Just use them when you feel like you need to use them. If you don't use them on time, your dragons will all die. Now let's take a look at this one. So this one I did a surgical, and sometimes there's going to be like wizard towers or multi-archer towers on these corners. That's really annoying because even with totem spells, your Edrags are going to get shot at. So with wizard towers, you want to kind of place your totems a little more inside so that the wizards don't splash onto your Edrags. And here I only used 2 Edrags because I knew that would be enough to take out the heroes and the long shot. Again, it takes experimentation and sometimes you mess up, but that's okay. And then I giant arrow the bottom and top sweeper, and also to funnel my dragon straight from the bottom right. And this is a really good example here because I know that I need to funnel my dragons right into that rage core and warn ability through it, but my dragons are kind of skewing to the right, so I rage the dragons kind of on the right so that they chain onto the buildings onto the right and get pushed right back left onto the middle, if that makes sense. And of course I chose to start my dragons on the right side as opposed to left side and go, on the left side I'd be going right into 2 sweepers and 2 spitters. It's really all about where can you place your dragons from so that you can save your warn ability for a dangerous core like this one, like a rage core. So this is a question you're going to have to ask yourself often with a lot of these base layouts. But like when there's like an Inferno Tower, 1 or 2 Inferno Towers in the middle, especially with the Rage, you really have to make sure you can save. You want to enter your dragons from an angle where you can save your warn ability and not be forced to pop it. If I place my dragons on the left there, I think that the sweepers, the wizard tower, the spitters are definitely going to force my warn ability really early. Now, one mistake I made here is I should have placed my RC on the left because her Frostflake has way more value with the Super Wizards and the Inferno instead of me wasting it on the top right. Alright, now for this base over here, you can see that I tried to do a surgical at the bottom, and there's no heroes in the bottom corner there, but there is a CC, the long shot, and the mono, and I identified that I can get my Edrags to chain right through those, so that'll be a good enough value. Now because there aren't any heroes down at the bottom, I thought I could get away with just using 1 Edrag, and that was a huge mistake. You can see how I embarrassed myself there. I didn't even finish the long shot off, and so I ended up investing a lot of resources. The idea was to try to get the CC, the long shot, and the mono. I ended up investing a lot of resources just to not even get the long shot, but the idea was correct. I was just too greedy. I should have placed down 2 Edrags. That would have gotten the job done. But as I said, no attack's going to be perfect, especially with this army. So later on, I'm going to make enough good plays to kind of save the attack. And honestly, getting long shot to 1 health is not bad either, because the super minion can just kill it in 1 shot later anyway. So I queen arrowed through 280s, and why did I choose to start my Edrags on the top right instead of the bottom? It's because, well, the sweepers, the spitters are facing downwards, and the revenge tower's up there, so it's better to take care of that earlier. And if I start it at the top, I can see that I can save my warn ability for that double rage core, and that's the main thing. Just, if I start my dragons at the bottom, there's a lot of stuff there. It's further away from the double rage core. I could see that if I start from the top, that there's a clean path straight into the core, and then I can use my warn ability. You can also notice, once again, my rage spell placements. I rage up the top corner for the Edrags to funnel my dragons right down the middle. So again, rage spells are very important. Some other things I haven't touched on so far is the druids. Actually, I haven't even talked about the druids, but there's nothing much to them. I just think they synergize really well with Edrags. There are pros and cons to the druids. The pros is, if you just look at the stats, they heal a ton. Like, their healing bounces off 4 targets. So if you're able to get the druids to effectively heal off a clump of Edrags, never mind even, imagine if you place your rage to rage up the Edrags, the rage up Edrags move forward really fast, and then the druids run forward to catch up, and the druids step on the rage, and they start rage healing the Edrags. So, the druids have a really high potential to heal a ton, like for their housing space. So often I put my druids down when my Edrags have pushed in halfway through, and the disadvantages of the druids, well, which you kind of have to work around, is that they're a ground troop, so you need to make sure to kill off the CC. If you're entering your Edrags from aside of the CC, you have to make sure the CC's gone before you place down your druids. You don't want to lure out the ice golems if possible. They just stall your Edrag so much. And secondly, the druids might get spring trapped, and the spring traps work even through the warn ability. And so I kind of just like to place my druids separately if possible, because usually the spring traps are clumped in groups. Some attacks you get unlucky and both your druids get sprung, but often, at least one or, two druids are up and healing your stuff, and that is just a ton of value that sometimes can actually just save an attack. So in my opinion, druids are really good with this army, especially given that I run 3 rages. So a rage up druid, boom, your Edrags are just instantly back to full health. Well, for this base, I saw that the king was isolated on the right hand side, so I just placed 2 Edrags to kind of chain for free onto him, and then I placed my dragons on the bottom right. This base teaches you that sometimes you have to warn ability early, you have to use your hero abilities early. I froze the outside Inferno to delay my warn a little bit, but at the end of the day, once my dragons got to the raged up wizard, raged up Inferno, I immediately warn ability and rage all the way through. And when there are some buildings up top that my dragons couldn't reach, I just used my RC flexibly and frost flaked it. Yeah, I'm getting a little hungry right now, so I think this is going to be the last replay, but everything I've said, in the latter half of the video is really just the patterns I've identified after attacking a lot of bases. And there's just so many patterns that it's impossible for me to cover all of them comprehensively in one video, but I tried to give like some of the important ones, but a lot of the patterns, especially as bases continue to evolve, it's really up to you to just to play Legends League with a decent mindset and just to FC if you're trying hard and identify those patterns for yourself. Review your failed attacks and see if there's a mistake that you can correct for next time. Now for reference, I actually haven't been practicing at all. I've kind of just been like logging on just to finish my Legends League hits just because, well, real life definitely got me a little down, and I just, haven't been able to practice as much, and I've kind of just been winging my Legends League hits. Even then, I'm hovering between like top 500 to top 200 in Legends, and I'm averaging around 260 to 270. Which I'm pretty okay with because, given that High Legends is where all the newest and gayest bases are, and I basically don't practice at all, so I'm okay with that. And my point is, I think this army is really good. I'm kind of winging my Legends League hits just from the fundamentals that I've learned like months ago. So, if someone tried hard to learn Edrags, or any army for that matter, you can definitely climb to High Legends. And yep, anyway, this is probably going to be my last Clash of Clans video for a long time because I want to explore other games. And so if you're just here for Clash content, I hope you enjoyed the Edrags tutorial, but definitely don't sub to me, and if you're already subbed, feel free to unsub. Anyway, have a good day.